Hello everyone, it's been a while. I took a bit of a break for the holidays and then I moved and now I'm going to school, but without further ado, here's a video. I wanted to share with y'all these two decks I've been playing to get from rank 20 to 15. They're not top tier decks, but they're a pretty good time. I found these online and the creators included pretty good details on how to play the deck, so if you want to know more about them, links will be in the description. Also, I may have changed some of the cards from the original deck because I didn't have certain cards or I felt I needed something different from the deck. First up is Chief_Lynessa Creeper Quest Paladin. At the beginning of the expansion, I really wanted to make a deck that took advantage of the synergy between the Paladin quest and Lynessa. I wanted to see if a big minion reward could outweigh the disadvantages of using Paladin board buffs in a slower paced game, and I think this is the best version of that deck, but it's still a little bit clunky. Let's start with the game plan. Play the quest, keep your minions on the board by playing buffs, and tempo into playing Lynessa or Galvadon, or in my version of the deck, you can also play Yogg. The deck sometimes has to stretch to a more controlling deck, but more often than not, I found getting any of the big hitters off around turn 10 gave me the best chance at winning. And a big reason why this deck works better than Un'Goro's Quest Paladin isn't really because of Lynessa, it's mostly because of the strong tempo cards like Call to Arms, Righteous Protector, and Corridor Creeper. Great reload, great value, and it really helps when the most powerful cards work in the deck you're trying to make. So let's talk about the opening hand and mulligans. Against almost every matchup, it's a good idea to keep Call to Arms. It's great board contest against aggro and will help you reload against control. Also, the deck has a pretty low curve, so you'll probably find something to play before turn 4. Now, if you're up against an opponent you think is aggro, like a hunter, you may consider mulliganing your quest, especially if you have a bad first hand, but I'd say that there are enough early game plays that most of the time it's fine to keep the quest. Surviving the early game, then using buffs to make favorable trades and gaining board control is how you beat aggro. For a more control matchup, because you're playing the quest on turn 1, you can mulligan any 1-drops if you already have a 2-drop, but really just try to curve out as cleanly as possible. So the opening is pretty standard, fight for the board and try to tempo out, but once you keep a minion on the board, the fun begins with buffs. I knew this card was good, but Potion of Heroism, which gives a minion Divine Shield and draws you a card, really shines in this deck. It allows you to clear enemy minions while conserving your own minions, and the card draw is nice because, well, card draw is a bit of an issue in this deck. But the amount of minion buffing is the highlight, and being able to use so much in a deck is kind of unique to Paladin. You're able to use a lot of buffs that you normally might not play and fight for board control with them, while in the back of your mind, you know with each buff you're also buffing Lynessa and getting closer to Galvadon. So let me give you the bad news. Draw can be an issue. Divine Favors doesn't work against every opponent, and the loot hoarders and potions are only so much. I only ran into card draw issues a few times, but usually against an opponent who's also running out of cards. The best advice I can give you is don't put all of your buffs into one board. You don't need to play too many cards if you have a good board of minions whose buffs allow them to stick for a long time, and you can maintain a good board as long as your opponent doesn't have too many board clears. And that's the biggest weakness of this deck. Not only does it not have any board clears, but your opponent board clears really hurt your game plan. Primal Fin Champion can return value to your hand, and Call to Arms is great reload, but if your opponent is able to clear your board 3 or 4 times, you're probably not going to win the game. Lynessa and Galvadon are big endgame hitters, but you definitely want to have a bit of chip damage before these big minions win you the game. Not having any board clears is really tough for maintaining board control, and I've tickled with the idea of running Equality, but it just doesn't fit into the board control game plan. If you're really falling behind, this deck's closest thing to a board clear is Sunkeeper Tarim. So there can be draw issues, board clears wreck this deck, and maybe a little more heal to combat aggro could help, but honestly I think this is the best Lynessa deck you can make out there. I had a 55% win rate out of 20 games, so it's not necessarily incredible, but it was a lot of fun. If you got the hankering to play some Paladin minion buffs, I'd definitely check this deck out. But now I've got a really solid deck for the current meta, Recruit Shaman. Wumbo Style created this deck and I had a 65% win rate out of 20 games. Again, both of these decks were from rank 20 to 15, so trust me, I'll get to higher ranks soon. But going into the Kobold's expansion, looking at the recruit cards, I originally thought, yeah, there'll be some good recruit cards, some bad ones, but I didn't think the recruit mechanic would lead to actual entertaining gameplay. Possessed Lackey and Master Oakheart are great, but I'm really surprised how well Gilded Recruiter synergizes with the Overload minions in Shaman. This is another mid-range deck that can kinda go into control, where you can last a little bit longer if you space out the cards right. So the plan, survive early game with board clears, deal chip damage over time, and win using big minion board fills by recruiting 4-mana 7/7s, playing 0-cost minions, or using your upgraded spellstone. In a dominating game, you'll usually win with a board of 7/7s. Now you don't need to recruit in order to win. It's sort of misleading to call it a recruit deck when you only run 2 recruit cards and 4 targets, but recruit is used in just another way to make big swings in your favor, and in almost every game you'll end up recruiting a minion. But besides the main recruiting mechanic, there are some other notable cards. It's pretty unique to run 2 Ancestral Spirits, but it works really well in this deck. You can get more value from Aya's Death Rattle, make big minions stick on the board like Earthen Elemental, or most beautiful of all, play it on a big minion, then Spellstone and get a giant board of minions that are going to be really hard to get rid of. Just pray for no devolve. In my version of the deck, I also run 2 Cobalt Scalebanes, and I replaced 2 Farsights for these because I think the deck does a pretty good job of curving out, and there were really no card draw issues for me, but I think Cobalt really works in this type of deck that focuses on big swings. It's easy to hide Cobalt behind a wall of minions, and if you have a board of scary minions, it's less likely your opponent will try to kill it, depending how smart they are. It's just another target for Spellstone, and if it lasts on the board long enough, the chip damage ends up becoming lethal damage. Now let's talk about mulligans. Regardless of your opponent, it's always good to keep Jadeclaw because it's really your only early game play. Against an opponent you think is playing control or mid-range, Gilded Recruiter is great because you guarantee yourself a lot of value as early as possible. Now against aggro, the deck actually thrives. I never really noticed it before, but Shaman is probably the best class for early game board clears. Against aggro, you want to keep any of these board clears and Drukhari Defender, and you should be able to fizzle out your opponent's aggro most of the time. Just some other little tips: don't be afraid to overload yourself a bit, because if you can keep board control and deal some chip damage early, you'll probably be able to overwhelm them a bit later. Because the minions are so big, most board clears actually can't kill your minions, even Dragonfire Potion. You know what, maybe just play a different deck if you're matched up against a lot of priests. But this deck is actually really great. It feels amazing to destroy aggro in the early game, and then you make a big swing in value on the board, and then you just go all face. 35% of my games were against Warlock, mostly Demon but some Zoo, and I won 6 out of 7 of those games. It's a different way to recruit than other decks, it's really fun when you get a giant board of minions, and it does pretty well against some of the other popular decks. I hope you can try out these decks. If you have any deck recommendations, let me know in the comments, or you can tweet me. My apologies for the hiatus, I just went on break for Christmas and then I moved and now I'm starting school again, but if I have to take another break in the future, I'll be sure to notify you all before I disappear. I'll hopefully be able to put a video out every few days, not exclusively Hearthstone anymore, so I hope you look at some of the other content I start posting. You know, I've made Hearthstone videos for a year now, so I want to try out some more things, but the majority of videos will still be Hearthstone. That's all for now, thank you for watching, and until next time, ta-ta.